You're allowed to be disappointed today, but tomorrow, 8:30, we don't talk about it. We move forward, right? But, to your point about real-time perspective now, yes, we're in a crisis. Yes, it's bloody tough. Yes, different industries have different challenges. But you could argue that everybody's facing those challenges. Everybody's got the same. I love the meme I saw the other day. We are not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm, right? And I think there's some great truth to that. But the point being, everybody else is having the same challenges as you. If you are operating at 120% with an engaged team, driving a little bit harder, you can succeed through a crisis. So in terms of perspective, applying that perspective, you can dwell on the negative, you can dwell on the difficulties and the challenges that you're facing, which everybody else is facing, or you can try and push that aside and say, but where are the opportunities? Let's put that in context. Where are the opportunities, and focus your time and energy on that.
So that brings us to the other P. And when you were 16 years old, your late father, who passed away on Christmas Eve last year, gave you the Calvin Coolidge quote on persistence. And it stayed with you through the challenges, the opportunities, the success stories, and elsewhere. And I love your ability to compartmentalize as a leader. I love your ability to show up no matter what's behind me. I've put that in a box, and now I'm here. Keeps you really present. Could you talk to people a bit about this persistence piece and why it matters so much to you, and how that compartmentalization aspect has been really helpful for you?
Yeah. So the persistence quote by Calvin Coolidge. I'll let you look that up yourself. But it was given to me by the most persistent man on the planet, not with us anymore, but my father. And it's stuck with me. And I think persistence is a huge asset in any business leader, any individual, any athlete that wants to do well. But we the concept of compartmentalizing, or what I call box it, and I've done presentations on this, is we can drag baggage from meeting to meeting or from interaction to interaction, and we really shouldn't. What we try to do is, we all have good meetings, we all have bad meetings, or presentations, or talks, or what have you. If we have a bad meeting over here and it's very challenging, and whatever the content of that meeting might be, it may be incredibly frustrating. We don't need to drag that baggage from that meeting into this one over here, which might be a fantastic opportunity. It could be business development. And I see that a lot in business, really just merging everything every day, every week into one. So the idea of and we've over the 10 years we've worked together, we've had, as Bluehaus, we've had some incredible weeks, some incredible days, but we've also had some horrendous days and some horrendous weeks, which really could have dragged us down as a business. But every day is a fresh day. Every day is a new start. And we talk a lot in the business about the idea of boxing it, right? As I said, if we've lost a project, we're allowed to be disappointed for today. Tomorrow's a new day, we move forward. So that idea of compartmentalizing the day, the week, we do it in years, don't we? We do it in quarters financially, but we don't do it in days and weeks. So I think that allows us to be persistent. That allows us to focus on what's important and maybe push aside what is not so important.
And I see you do it as a leader as well. And I'm going to use persistence in a moment as well, because I'm going to try and send people out to breakout rooms again, which should be entertaining. But I see that I love the way you communicate with me, and this is something that's always sat with me around you, the one call a day, which is a key ritual for you, where not the call you have to make, but the call that you make that makes a connection with people.
Yeah.
Who's the friend you like the most? The person that only ever calls you when they need something? Or is it the person that calls you to say, how are you getting on? How are you going? But I also love the way you as a leader talk about that compartmentalization as well, in terms of, right, I might have a lot on my mind as a leader, but when I see a member of my team I've got to remember that might be their 5 minutes with the CEO this week. How do I want them to go away from me, having had an interaction with me? Do I want them to go away from me thinking, listen, I want to spend more time on you? Or do I want them to go away thinking, oh, Ben's really stressed, or Ben's got a lot on, or Ben's distracted? So I love that idea. And I know, like all of us as human beings, we don't always get that right.
No.
But I love that it's in your mindset that your people matter. And we're in that space where your people do matter. So I'm going to try a breakout room again. Persistence, I think, is really important. I'm going to come and give the guys a bit of a hand while we're doing that. So when we have a look in this breakout room this time, we've got a really interesting question. So the question is, and you talked about that, how leaders drive engagement. Well, I'm going to set this up. Talk about how you see yourself as a leader driving engagement, and what's the thing that you do that you think, right, yeah, that breaks engagement, and I have to be aware of that.
Yeah, sure. So which camera am I looking at here? So one of the things we do in Bluehaus Group is we're going to talk about this as we summarize all the takeaways. And James and I got together last night on, what have we learned over the 10 years of building engagement, and we're going to talk about Gallup engagement in a moment, is the idea of servant leader. I think we embraced this very early. It's actually a phrase that James introduced me to, and I think we brought this into the business very early. This idea that the people within the business and the team within the business are there to support the leaders, and there is truth to that, obviously. But what if we turn that on its head? What if we look at the culture of servant leader? Myself, James, we have five leaders within our business: head of architecture, head of ID, head of MEP, so including James and myself. What if the mindset around leadership is that we are there to serve the people within the business, and we do everything we can to make their tasks and the jobs that they perform within the teams as easy and efficient as possible? And I think that's really worked for us and helped us build on our engagement.
Great, BC. So I've jumped in. Hopefully, we're about to open up breakout rooms. Guys, I want you to think about, and I know there's some great leaders on this call today, like David LeBoucher running Optimal Fitness, people like Billy Harkin on the call, who's built and led businesses in different ways. And I know you've lent into both of those people for different perspective. Craig Falconer, lots of different people who are leading in different ways. When you're in the room, and you may be in the room as someone who is a leader or someone who works under a leader, when you're in the room, I want you to think about, how do leaders drive engagement? So getting that extra discretionary effort out of people. And then how do they break it? What are the things that they do that breaks engagement? So I'm going to send you out to the breakout rooms now, and enjoy. Welcome back. It's really great to have you back in the room. Ben and I have been having a look at some of the breakout groups and thinking about what the discussion might be around. But if I have a look at the next slide after our insights, the thing that's really interesting for us is around what are the things that actually drive engagement. So according to Gallup, there are 3 key pieces. So one, as a leader, the one-to-one. If you only have time for one thing, make sure you get the one-to-one done. And that one-to-one, what does a great one-to-one look like? It looks like, tell me about the best day you've had at work this year. What made it a great day? How can I help you have more of those days? What did you achieve on that day? So it's understanding what great one-to-ones look like and constantly build around that. Questions, the insight around questions is key, because if you tell people what to do, you end up owning it. And I hear so many leaders say to me in the coaching space, Ben, my team's not really engaged. I don't get much ownership. And that piece around questions, I think, is really important. And the last one I want to throw to you a bit around is high expectations. And you rightly said, first and foremost, of yourself as a leader. But what we find with people are great. If you expect a lot from a person, they'll give you lots. But if you don't expect much from people, they won't let you down either. So having high expectations for people and putting support around it. But then you made a great point about high expectations of yourself as well. So tell me a little bit more about, of those three pieces, that high expectation piece. What does that mean for you in the way that you show up to lead?
Well, I think it's important. I have high expectations of myself, and when I look around the people in Bluehaus Group, across the leadership team and right across the business, we've built a team of people that have high expectations of themselves as well. And I think culturally within the business, we deliver and we build on that culture of high expectation right across the business. We don't always get it right. Mistakes will be made. And you can't innovate and you can't learn without a level of failure along the way. But if there is a culture ingrained, and again, it comes back to having the right team and the right people on the bus, then there's a level of accountability with each other if we have high expectations of one another. But I think particularly in leadership, and I know most of the people that you have on today are leaders or senior leaders or directors of businesses or owners. If you have to lead by example. I think if you have high expectations of yourself, that certainly helps to drive that sense of high expectation across the business as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I really love that. I think if we look at 2016, so slide just says 2016. It was an interesting time because actually you knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And this is what I've always loved about your approach to life, because when you knew something wasn't right, and we had a mantra in Bluehaus Group, which was Bluehaus Group, thinking world class. So you recognized that there wasn't something right. So rather than trying to fix it and then do an engagement survey to see if you were successful, you said, no, I've got a sense that something's not right. Let's do the engagement survey and see where we land. So tell me about what motivated that for you.
Yeah, 2016 was pivotal for us as a business. Now, to put things in perspective, we'd come through the GFC fairly well. We'd accelerated out of the corner, as I talked about. We had a couple of great years in 2013 and 14, fantastic years of delivering great projects and revenue, etc. We'd reinvested a lot of that. And then, I'm not ashamed to say, I feel like we took our eye off the ball a little bit. There was a couple of people, you can have the best culture in the world, which we're going to come to. You can have the best culture in the world, and but it is fragile. It only takes one or two of the wrong people, poisonous, negative mindset, perhaps, to come into that culture, and it is very, very fragile. And I feel like that's what happened. So James and I, we got to sort of 2015, 16, and we knew that there was something not quite right with the culture. It wasn't what we wanted it to be. We would have been around 14 years old at that point, so well established. And having had lots of conversations, we wanted to first work out who we are as a business from an engagement point of view before we tried to make drastic decisions to fix anything. So the idea was, with your help as well, the idea was let's undertake a Gallup engagement survey across the business, kind of knowing that the results weren't going to be great. But that will give us a basis to start from, and then we can start the journey of building the culture that we want, a world-class culture, which is what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, fantastic. So if we move on from thinking world-class and we look at the first set of results, these are the 2016 Bluehaus Group results, and you'll understand that great results are in green, average results are in brown, yellow, and poor results are in red.
Yeah.
It doesn't it doesn't necessarily make for great reading at first look. But what was interesting and what we could work around and move towards around that was the insight that, listen, globally, organizations end up with about 14% engagement. And now that's remarkably low. But if I go to the next slide and see what it looked like, we ended up with a slide that, thinking world class, we had to have a question mark on that.
Yeah.
We had to have a question mark on that. And the grand mean percentile rank put us in the bottom 26% of businesses in the world around engagement. So there were some decisions to make, even though we were the pieces around some average. There were some areas that we had to fix.
Absolutely. You know, we knew the result wasn't going to be great, but it was very disappointing. So again, this was 2016. We had a couple of people in the business who weren't right for our culture. It wasn't where we needed to be, but it gave us a starting block. It gave us a platform to start from and something to build from. So it wasn't a wild stab in the dark. You know, we hear the words culture and world class thrown out all over the world in various businesses. We wanted something that was tangible, that was measurable. You know, how do we know when we've achieved world class?
Yeah, and that's what's great about Gallup. They said, right, to be in that world class piece, you want to be in that grand mean percentile of 80 and above. You know, so you're in the top 20% of businesses in the world. And so when we look at that piece, and it was really interesting, really fascinating what we did with that piece. You know, you and I started putting together these first line managers, giving managers in the business responsibility for engagement rather than just making it about that. James was pivotal in that, around engaging the leadership of the business as well. A lot of our rituals started to rise up through the board as well. The carpe diem and how we had discipline around our disciplines and all of those contacts. So we get to 2020. So we get to the 2020 piece. And 2020 is a really interesting time. So let's keep in mind, let's perspective again and some context here as well. Engagement, the engagement score, and we're going to endeavour to get James to join us on the call here in a moment as well. When we did this engagement survey, it wasn't. We didn't say, right, we're going to do it in a downtime or anything like this. But we were doing this engagement survey right at the start of this time of uncertainty as well. So it spoke a lot about the culture. That if we look at the results in 2020. And remember, and I think you want to speak about how it's been year-on-year growth as well, because obviously we've been in the green for a while now around those engagement scores. What do you see? What do you feel like when you see this slide, especially compared to the slide before?
Well, I think it's important to talk about, you know, the journey as well. So we got that set of results in 2016, which weren't great. And one of your phrases, which I love, is it's the space between the notes that makes the music. So it wasn't that we just did a survey every 12 months and just, you know, let's see how it goes. That first set of results we got in 2016 gave us an opportunity to go back to the business and have those one-on-ones, talk to everybody and say, right, you know, we want to improve. James and I gave ourselves a KPI that we must improve on we have a few KPIs, but one of them was to improve on the year-on-year engagement survey results. So that's not going to happen automatically. So, you know, as you said, it was one-on-ones. You've got to take action. You've got to make sure that there's that discipline there. There's the structure, you know, follow-up conversations with the team. So we had a year-on-year improvement from, you know, 16, 17, 18, 19. And we were getting there. We actually, truthfully, gave ourselves a 3-year goal to achieve it, notwithstanding a couple of difficult years in the middle, which I think, you know, we all experienced in 16 and 17. So we didn't quite do it in the 3 years we would have liked. But when I look at these results, And again, understanding that this survey was done just at the start of COVID-19 for the previous 12 months. We're incredibly proud. Now, what it does, one thing, we have hit world class, as you talked about. We've hit the 80 grand mean. It's worth explaining a little bit about Gallup as well. They use the same 12 questions. It's entirely anonymous, so we don't know who's responding, and I think it has to be, doesn't it? Because that's the only way we're going to get real results. But yeah, so we've hit that 80 mark.
So when you have a look at this world class piece, there's a great sense of pride in that space, isn't it? To be in that grand mean percentile of 80. I know when you said, Nick, I feel like we're going to get it, and I'm thinking, my God, like with all that's going on, but to open that and see that and feel that. And I remember it. I sent it to you on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
We had a phone call. I said, I'm going to send you something. Open it up. I think we'll enjoy it. Now, I'm going to try and connect with James. If James is on our call as well. Cobza, how do you feel when you see those results, mate?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone on the call. Lots of familiar faces out there. Mick, good to hear your voice. Ben, good to see you again. Look, it's a team effort, and I was surprised. You're right, Mick. It's a difficult year. It's a very challenging year. There's a lot of distractions. So when we were looking to do the engagement survey, there was definitely some proactive internal public relations that needed to go around that. And we surprised ourselves with the result. We wanted to better our previous year's results, and that was going to be difficult. But there's been a lot of over communication in the last year and a half to get the business to where it is at the moment, which I'm proud to say is the best position I've ever seen it in. And that's not just because of Ben and I at all. It's because of everyone else in the team, and because of the way we rely on them. Are also completely transparent with them. That's exactly where we are, how we feel, and where we're headed. And that's what has created the engagement and the result that you see, mate.
Yeah, fantastic, Cobbs. And I just want to point out to everybody who's out there that to be part of Bluehaus, you don't have to be tall and bald. That's not a
really.
It's not a prerequisite.
Just bald.
Even though the CEO and the managing director have some striking similarities. So, Cobbs, thanks for joining in. And we're going to, at the end, we're going to have some Q&A as well. We're going to give other people an opportunity to pick the brain of Ben, ask some questions. I think one of the pieces around engagement is so important. And Cobbs spoke about it there, and BC spoke about it as well. It's a collaborative piece. The only thing worse than not doing an engagement survey is doing it and then doing nothing with the results. Don't do it. So what I've loved about the commitment, and I know the people that you have in your CARP DM, and I've thrown that word out a couple of times, which is your Sunday morning meeting or your daily meeting around seizing the day. And if you, and at the end, we're going to isolate a couple of your key takeaways then. But if there was one thing that you think it made the biggest difference for you in that space, what was it?
Wow, one thing. Okay, I mean, towards the end, we've got a list of learning. I think, the back end of what James just said there, over communication.
Yeah. Over
communication. I mean, there's lots of things. There's lots of learning. There's a few other things that on the tip of my tongue that I could say, but over communication is fundamental. Very, very transparent culture. But to your point, words without action are more detrimental than no words at all.
Yeah, and I had Scotty Waygart, and Scotty might even be joining in the call shortly. And I had a great chat with Scott on last week, and Scott said something, a great Japanese proverb: strategy without action is a daydream. Action without strategy is a nightmare. Right. So the whole idea around incorporating those pieces, coming up with not just getting the engagement survey pieces, but then taking away the learning. And you'll see one of my favorite quotes is a quote from Socrates. Thank you for giving me, it's the space between the notes that makes the music. Actually, that quote belongs to Wayne Dyer, but I'll happily grab the
claim it.
Claim it. Learning is remembering is a Socrates quote. We're talking philosopher, not footballer. So my big three, if I look at the Mick Todd, what are the big three things that I've taken out of my journey with Bluehaus? And, you know, I feel like I'm a partner with Bluehaus. You know, it's not, it's more than work. The first one is be decisive. Winners choose. Winners make choices. They don't sit on the fence, and if they're going to fail, they'll fail fast. So, and I think that's really important at the moment. The other one, the second one is be optimistic, and I'm really deliberate with my words around optimistic, because people say to me all the time, "Oh, you mean positive?" And I said, no, not positive, optimistic. Optimistic is consistent, considered, decisive, positive action. And it changes the world. The four things we know about the optimistic, according to Cornell, are: one, they live longer; two, they're happier statistically; three, they're more successful; four is an interesting one. Apparently, they also maintain higher level brain function for later in life. I'm a scientist at the heart of success as well. I love to study what makes people successful. So be optimistic, not blindly positive, but make sure you're taking consistent, considered, decisive, positive action all over the place. And then the importance of rituals. You've heard me talk about them. It was the reason we connected at the very start of this 10-year journey, mate. That word,
yeah.
Yeah, that word. And so the Carpe Diem, the engagement survey, the focus on strengths. Everyone in Bluehaus Group has done StrengthsFinder. And just a couple of weeks ago, before I even asked you about this event, you said, Mick, right, it's time to update. I want to make sure we've got everyone's strengths and we understand what their strengths are and how they can use them more productively. And when it comes to rituals, I talk about them being the consistent behaviors, intentionally practiced, so being present and in the room, not just ticking things off the list, and precisely scheduled, like the Carpe Diem, that drive success for organisations and individuals. And you know, I know there's so many people on this call already that understand the power of ritual and the impact of it. So those are my big three. I asked you to come up with three, but you said, no, I'm going to stretch it out. And I said, no, mate, it's a...
Winners choose, right?
Winners choose.
Winners choose.
So we came up with Ben Corrigan's Magnificent Seven. So Ben, let's have a look at your Magnificent Seven. I think they're really interesting pieces.
Well, it's James and I got together on this because honestly, this was a list of probably 15. But again, winners choose, right? Yeah. So, and there has been so much learning over the last 10 years. You know, if you include the GFC, and if you include 16 and 17, that's two. This is our third crisis, right? So, and we've had two.
And you haven't wasted them.
And we haven't wasted them. I mean, I'm a big believer, and as the old Churchill saying, never let a crisis go to waste, right? So let's go through them. And again, James and I sort of really tried to drill down on this. We struggled to get to three. As you can see, but the first one I've already talked about: build a servant leader culture. You know, really try and tip it on its head and drive that mindset within the leadership. That, you know, if the leadership are there to serve the team and the people within the business, many other things kind of work themselves out almost because there's a sense that the team are well supported. They feel loved and looked after and supported, and they have all the tools they need. So that's deliberately number one.
Yeah.
Number two, play the long game, invest and reinvest. And James and I talked about this a lot yesterday. I mean, we even in the midst of the GFC, we, instead of letting people go, we engaged you and said, look, we know we have a good business. We know we have a great group of people. Come and tell us what we don't know. As you know, we made a loss in 2010. We made that back in profit in 2011. But most importantly, we didn't let anyone go. We kept the team together, which was in the construction industry was unheard of at the time. But play the long game. We had 2 great years in 13 and 14. We reinvested a lot of that. We came up with a key 3 strategy, which was diversification. We were too reliant on one sector. So we looked at pushing into hospitality. We looked at pushing into F&B. We looked at pushing into aviation and 1 or 2 other sectors. And then there was diversification of capability. We already had an MEP division, but it was around about that time that we established an architectural division, which is a great business unit for us now. So we diversified that as well. And the third part of key 3 was investment in tech. We made some really good decisions then in terms of Revit, virtual reality, laser scanning, all of which, frankly speaking, are helping us navigate this crisis that we're in today, and has given us a bit of a USP. So those are the decisions we made 5, 6, 7 years ago. Number 4, know your business inside and out. And it sounds so obvious, but when we've got a team of 50, you can take your eye off the ball, and I'm not ashamed.
And it was a piece that Billy spoke to you about when you 2 got together for a chat. He said at one stage, I found myself in the back seat of the car and I needed to get back in the front seat.
Yeah. No, again, it sounds so obvious, and James and I talk about this all the time. We're constantly looking at, running stats or what's going on there or what's happening here, or having a one-on-one conversation with somebody in the business. Just know your business inside out.
But that goes back to the point number 3 too, about the open dialogue as well, doesn't it? Dialogue is such an important piece. It's because it's not communication.
Yeah.
Because it goes 2 ways. Yeah. And that even the way the office is set up around people constantly in dialogue. Yeah. I love that part.
Yeah, I realised I missed that point out, didn't I? Transparent and open dialogue, and deliberately the word dialogue, not the word communication. Yeah. Dialogue is 2-way. The 5th, focus on strengths. That's why we're here today, isn't it? To focus on Gallup. So we really tried to turn the culture of the business on its head from 2010, but more specifically from 2016, to say, look, let's not ignore people's weaknesses. Let's manage those. We know everybody has weaknesses, but let's really celebrate and focus on people's strengths. We got everybody in the business to do Gallup Strength Finder, and many of our team have them on the screen, and they celebrate on the top 5. And we even moved people around in the business based on their strengths and where they were most engaged. 6, little things do matter. So there's this idea that, I'm too senior or I'm too important to get down into the trenches. A macro strategy is important, whether it's a 1-year strategy or a 5-year plan. Of course, that's important, with clear goals, clear measurable KPIs. But you can't do that without the small daily and weekly disciplines. So whether it's a daily discipline around, you talk about the Carpe Diem, and we talk about having huddles within the business. We talk about making sure that we're having a one-on-one. 1 call a day is a ritual I have. Sometimes that's 3 calls a day, or 3 unnecessary calls.
I think it's really important to land on that point for a moment. They're not calls. They're calls that are genuinely there to say, "How are you? How's it? How are things going?" Yeah. And the things that grow out of those 1 call a day or 3 calls a day, and I think particularly in the crisis, times in life, those are the people, the people that are able to do that in the good times. They're the ones where those relationships around them when things get challenging, aren't they?
They are. And let's just talk about that for a moment, because if there's one thing anyone wants to take away from this today, is that one call a day. We call it one call a day, but it could be 2 or 3. Is we live in a very reactive world, you know, where we're spinning plates, and particularly in business. If we introduced the idea of one call a day probably about 6 years ago. Me and James do it, but we focused on that across the senior leadership team, and that's calls to client, not necessarily because there's a problem or we're chasing an invoice, but just to ask them, you know, are you happy? Are we looking after you? What
else could we do?
It could be to a contractor who we're working with, you know, how's it going? It could be to it's about partnership and relationships. And if you're the firm that is doing that, you know, and we've even had clients who have said, you know, because I might have called them one day and James might have called them 2 days later to see how they are, because they're an important client. So you know, as James touched on earlier on, the idea of over communication, and we even expanded that to we're big into partnerships and relationships. You know, why not call our supply partners just to say, what's it like working with us? You know, how is that? You know, so one call a day is so powerful. And lastly, number 7, less can be more than enough. So what does every surfer know? James being the surfer in the business. You know, you don't have to catch every wave. You shouldn't go looking for every wave. Just look for the good ones that suit you, that are, you know, aligned with your business model. And we learned that probably the hard way, actually, a few years ago. We are much more aware of who we are as a business, much more aware of which projects are just right for us and where we deliver value.
And I think that's such a key piece, isn't it? It is seeing and understanding where you deliver value. I think it's a really important piece. So number 7 around that piece, I love that story, because when you talk about that, what does every surfer know? You can't stop the waves.
Yeah.
No, the waves will keep on coming, but you don't have to catch every one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, Cobbs is a surfer. So we're getting to the time now. We have this last slide, and you've seen this slide before. It's the now or never slide. Yeah. And for a lot of people, it sort of feels like that at the moment. And we understand that, and we understand the reason why. But I think one of the things that I take away from your journey, because when we look at your business 10 years ago, there were some now or never moments. And that those, by staying true to those principles, a great Ross Macaulay piece of language, you know, focus on your principles and your guidelines and going through those pieces, that you've got to your space where Bluehaus Group, a fantastic business, and I know we had breakfast on Sunday mornings in preparation for this. So apologies to anyone who received the invite for this session as masters at work. Oh my God. Ben and I were tongue-in-cheek, apparently never be tongue-in-cheek, because Melanie is always going to send exactly what is on the piece. But in all seriousness, those engagement scores are world-class, and they're not there by accident. So in the last 10 minutes or so, the team here have done a great job in the background, learning our way through. You know, this is the thing. We want to take risks. We need to do things differently. We can't just keep on doing the same thing and expecting a different or better result. So we wanted to come and do this today, record it. We're going to be uploading it and sharing it. But if there's anyone out there with some questions, so there's some questions here that I think we're about to have shared via WhatsApp, or they're about to arrive. Fantastic. Key one-to-one questions. What are your priorities for the next week? How can I help you achieve your priority objectives? There's some interesting questions here. But does anyone else have any other questions at the moment? Because I think we covered this piece. One of the things that I do love is here, tall, bald, and bearded, from Dave Labouchere, the Bluehaus look, seriously impressive pair.
The rest of the team are much better looking.
Yeah, seriously. Interesting. And does anyone have any other questions on the group chat? Sorry, anyone have any other questions on the group chat? Things they wanted to talk about? Anyone with a hand in the air that you can, Romwell, you can open up for us? Any questions? Oh, they're typing in. People can type in.
So they can type who wants to have question, and then I'm gonna open the audio.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. If you have a question, just put your name into the chat box, and we'll open you up on the audio. Now, there's a few people out there probably have some questions. In this moment, then, you know, there's a couple of pieces that. How do you keep, right, this is a great question. How do you keep resilience when you and the team are up against it? And I've got some insights on this from working with great organisations as well. And that's a great question from Neil Munro in Brisbane, who's joined us from Brisbane today. How do you keep resilience when you're up against it?
Yeah, it is a great question, because that's when we're all tested, right? And I think resilience is such an important word at the moment. I mean, we even see it being talked about. You know, raising kids, it's the number one thing we need to drive within our kids' mindset is resilience.
And so when you and your team are up against it, because there's a lot of great theory out there, and we all know that. Well, one of the things that I love is that life is a collision sport, you know, and we're running into life at the moment, and it's not all beer and Skittles. So how do you maintain that level of resilience in those challenging times? Yeah,
I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is trying to make sure, you know, we try to laugh a lot. We try to have fun within the business, no matter how challenging things are. We can, particularly James and I and the team, we can have the most difficult conversation, but we try to make sure that there's humor in there. And it sounds a bit throwaway as a comment, but I think you know, we are human, and we try to make sure that, you know, we haven't lost the human spirit within the business. But I want to go back to something I said earlier on, is to compartmentalize, is to bring perspective and compartmentalize. Is, you know, we can be sat in a boardroom or a meeting room in the most difficult of situations, and we try to bring again the human spirit and humor into that as much as we can. But let's break it down into pieces. You know, let's break the problem down, because usually when you say up against it, it's usually around a problem. It might be a macro problem like COVID-19, or it could be a much more manageable problem on a particular project. But I'm a big believer in the idea of boxing it and compartmentalizing it. So, you know, whether that's up on a wall, you know, let's put the problem up on the wall, process of elimination, perhaps, but make sure as much as possible, and it isn't easy when you're up against it, that we don't forget the human factor, the human spirit, and bring humor and personality into those challenges.
Yeah, and fantastic insight, mate. I think even just saying the word excited changes. The anxiety, by definition, is uncertainty multiplied by powerlessness. So giving people more certainty and empowering people as well. What do they say about resilience? Control what you can control.
Yeah.
See the challenge as an opportunity, something to get excited about.
Yeah.
Think about contribution. What can I give? What can we give at the moment? And then treating yourself like someone you feel responsible for. David's got a sorry.
I just wanted to, control what you can control. It's a statement that comes up so much at the moment in Bluehaus Group, and something James and I talk about. But just to finish off that question from Neil Monroe, there is, you know, we see it all the time. People getting bogged down and stressed and distracted by something they have zero control over, whilst this thing over here. You know, if we put our time and energy into this, then, you know, that's where the energy needs to be. And particularly during this crisis of COVID-19, and again, the question about being up against it, really, and I'm glad you said that, you know, control what you can control. and try to push aside anything that you have zero control over.
And I think that's a really powerful piece, and high performers do as well. There's a couple of other great questions here. Bluehaus Group, fantastic team. Where next? What next for Bluehaus? Here's a question from David.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So an improvement on those engagement results. We would like to push on, but we have a strategy which is it's about building value within the business. You know, we're in the middle of this crisis, like everybody else. Not in the same boat.
You're not immune to it.
We're not in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm, as they say. So James and I are very focused at the moment on not letting this crisis pass us by. You know, really strong emphasis on, you know, keeping the team together, ensuring our clients are looked after, and then accelerating out of the corner as we talked about. So, you know, frankly speaking, it's difficult in the middle of COVID-19 to have a 2-year, 3-year plan, which we usually like to have. But what we are very clear on is you know, I've even given myself a goal, to sit on the business breakfast and say X, Y, and Z, which I won't go into now because I don't want to jinx it. But where next is about, you know, making sure we accelerate out of the corner. I want to make sure that we are a better business and a better team, not despite the crisis, but because of the crisis.
Yeah, and that leads into, there's a couple of other great questions here, and I'm conscious of everyone's time around this as well, but there's a couple of other great questions I want to touch into here as well. So Serge, and this is a really interesting one. I'm gonna lead the way with this, and then you can follow up with it. Serge talked about, you mentioned play the long game, invest and reinvest, but when's enough? When's enough? When do you decide good money can become bad money? So I'm going to talk about what I've seen in the organisation. Your investment hasn't all just been money.
No.
It's been about time and energy with people.
Yeah.
Around, yeah, sure, there's been and investment around engagement surveys that do cost money and other pieces as well. But I think investment, from my perspective with you, elements of it sure is money. So when you're going to invest money, it's in a really targeted area as well. But when you're going to invest time, energy, enthusiasm, those people in people, that's also a really targeted piece as well, isn't it? Around investment and reinvestment.
Yeah. So when I say investment, it's not just financial. I mean, it is, as you say, time, energy, possibly leaning into relationships, you know, focusing on the relationships that are a win-win as well. And Serge, I know you're in a really challenging industry, you know, F&B, which is probably one of the hardest industries at the moment. Exactly to that point, it doesn't necessarily need to be financial. It can be time. But yeah, you know, I get that. It's a great question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer to it, but I guess the only thing I would say is to support your point is that when I say investment, it doesn't just mean financial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've got one more question here from Billy Hollywood Harkin. So Hollywood would like to know, and it's a great question, by the way, from a great guy, a great leader, a guy that's been through these pieces. I think it's a really interesting one. What is the thing that you believe you are better at during this crisis than you were during the last crisis? And how will you leverage this now? What are you actually better at now than you were before? And I might just throw that question at James in a moment as well, to do that as well. What do you think you're better at now than you were before?
That's a great question. I wish you'd sent that to me this morning to give me some time to think. Yeah. That's a great.
You know, Billy, he's in the moment.
Yeah. Look, I think the GFC was my first crisis as a leader. So there was, you know, a level of naivety. You know, we leaned into To Be Limitless to come in and help us. You know, we had help, but we were learning on the job, so to speak. With this crisis, I feel, to speak for myself, James can talk in a moment. I feel like I was much better prepared. You could argue different crisis dynamics, but a crisis nonetheless. The last crisis, and I consider 16 and 17 not necessarily a crisis, but very, very difficult years with the Middle East and the world the way it was. So what am I better at? I think we made, as Bluehaus Group, we made some very quick, smart decisions early. We communicated with the team very, very early. We were having town halls and groups saying, look, this might happen, this might be coming, and this is what we think might come. And I think that's really helped us. Probably communication. I think communication, just really getting the team together and saying, look, we're about to go through a big storm here. Let's batten down the hatches and let's look after one another.
Yeah, fantastic. Cobbs, what about for you, mate? What do you think as a business, James, you're doing better now than you've done before?
As a business, video conferencing? No, but joke aside, definitely using technology to our advantage. So we are a consultancy, so it's about making sure that our clients' expectations are met. And if we can shift our clients' expectations, some of the more antiquated clients, into the technology world that we have been experimenting with through innovation for many years now, and they become more susceptible to what we see as solutions for them, we don't have to jump in the car and drive to Abu Dhabi for a 15-minute face-to-face conversation. And that's a VC. But more importantly, some of the innovations that we have within our technology group that we can now show because of this crisis as an innovation, and how they can actually look to expect results from virtual reality, from mock-up room virtual reality, from VCs and reading into emotions through a camera, then we can become more of a business and more robust as a business. So we're not just confined to that face-to-face. We're not just confined to a geographical region anymore. We're not just confined to one particular client. We can now experiment with more personalities, more people, and drop a pebble in a pond, and it can have more ripples because we can use innovation through technology from a crisis that's enabled us to benefit from it.
Fantastic. Great insights, Cobbs. Thanks a million. Well, guys, we've come to the end of today. Really, we're always really conscious of your time. We're really thankful for you joining our Thursday sessions. Peter Turner's going to be hosting next week's Thursday session on, interestingly, around growth mindset. I think a pretty appropriate piece. In a couple of weeks' time, we've got David. On the 16th of June, we've got Pivotal Parish, which will be another event like this, talking about what a great pivot looks like in this time. David Labouchere, who joined us today as well. Really thankful for all of the support for these Thursday sessions. They're here for us to reach out and make a contribution. Our fantastic coaching team, the Magnificent Seven, that includes Neil Munro in Brisbane, Vicky Tipper, Tina Moulders, Tim Popperwell, Martin Dewhurst. It also includes David Labouchere, who I've spoken about before as well. That these coaches that are here, and obviously Peter Turner, all of our team, Sarah Dalton, around emotional intelligence as well. All of those team are here to support you at the moment as well. There's never been a more important time to be engaged, and there's never been a more important time for strengths. So they're our core messages as an organisation. And thank you so much, not just for today. It's great that we've got together to celebrate this as a 10th anniversary. Insight, and it's great to see where you come from as a business and where you are as a business, and they're fantastic people. I think that's the last thing we'd like to say. James has a term that he calls the Bluehouses, the members of the Bluehaus culture. And as when I asked Ben last night what he's proudest of, it's the people, the people that make up Bluehaus Group. So fantastic, mate. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great weekend. Ben and I hope that you all have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic. Cheers.